شكرا جزيلا أستاذ أحمد. سأقوم بتقديم الفقرة باللغة العربية أولا، ثم بعد ذلك ننتقل باللغة الإنجليزية. طبعا هدفنا اليوم هو دراسة بنود جدول الأعمال لاجتماع 53 للجنة المواد المضافة للأغذية CCFA53. طريقة عملنا ستكون مقسمة على 3 أجزاء. نحن استدعينا الدكتور فان يونغشيانغ الذي هو رئيس اللجنة، رئيس لجنة CCFA، وهو أيضا نائب مدير عام للهيئة الصينية لسلامة الغذاء، لتقييم المخاطر سلامة الغذاء. فسنعطي المجال للدكتور فان لكي يقدم لنا يعني عرض عام حول ما يعتبره هو ما هي بنود جدول الأعمال ذات الأهمية بالنسبة له كرئيس لهذه اللجنة. ثم بعد ذلك سنعتمد على وثيقة قمت بإرسالها إليكم عبر مجموعة الواتساب التي قامت بتحليل يعني مصغر لعدد من بنود جدول الأعمال. وفي الآخر سنتعرض ل3 بنود لجدول الأعمال المتعلقة، هما البند 8 والتاسع والعاشر، وسنتعرض لهذه البنود عبر حوار أجريته صباح اليوم مع ممثلي الوفد الكندي للCCFA والمتواجد حاليا في هونغ كونغ. فهذا يعني طريقة عملنا. قمنا يعني تغيير عن العادة، فقط يعني تكون عروض. سيكون هذا يعني المرة هذه يعني طريقة مختلفة لكي نقوم بتحليل هذه البنود. So thank you very much again, Dr. Fan, for agreeing to be with us. I was just introducing you to the group. So you are here with us within the Arab Codex initiative that is in fact managed by the Arab Industrial Development Standardization and Mining Organization. It's an initiative that is funded by the US Codex Office and implemented within the Arab region. We may also have some colleagues from the Southwest Pacific region that may be joining us, given that they have heard that you will be speaking to the Arab region, so they might be joining us later. I was just explaining that in the way we are preparing the Arab delegations to the CCFA53, we are adopting somewhat a different approach by, first of all, actually making or taking advantage of your participation and your willingness to be with us, such that you give us an overview of the agenda items that you consider of importance for this upcoming meeting. Anything essentially where you may consider that Arab delegations could also support you in bringing consensus about for some of the discussions that are coming. We have also prepared a very short analysis of some agenda items that I will be using through a document that was shared with Arab delegations. And we have also interviewed representatives of the Canadian delegation to the CCFA who have been kind enough to speak to us about 3 agenda items, in fact 3 discussion papers, agenda item 8, 9, and 10 of the meeting, because we understand that there might be some discussions around those, so we wanted to bring another perspective. So this is the way we're going to be going through this agenda, and I guess we're going to give you the floor. I've introduced you as the chair of CCFA, but you are also the Deputy Director General for the China National Center of Food Safety Risk Assessment, CIFSA. So welcome and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sami. And I'm also very happy to have this opportunity to talk with member countries, especially to Arabic countries. Because, you know, as the chair of the Codex Committee, it's my job to talk to every members or observers who have interest to the agenda items. So as today, I already had a very full day with the discussion with Codex Secretariat on the whole agenda items. So I will use this opportunity to just a very quick brief you about the whole plan of the CCFA 53. So you know, tomorrow and Saturday, and we are going to have the physical working group on GSFA and on endorsement and alignment. I don't know how many members of you will join us physically. I don't know how many members, how many delegates now in Hong Kong.
Yeah, my understanding is that there will be representation from Egypt, from Morocco, from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as well as from Sudan in person.
Okay.
But there may be more.
Jordan,
Good.
Sami.
And Jordan as well. So Jordan as
okay.
well. Physical participation.
Okay, good. So maybe some agenda item I need to also to get your recommendation or suggestions, and because is during our discussion with the Codex Secretariat, we found that might be very difficult to reach agreement. So so tomorrow and Saturday, the physical working group on GSFA and alignment will have a very heavy workload, and they are going to discuss agenda item 5A, 5B, 5C, and 5 okay, 5A, B, C. I think it's a lot of documents and hundreds of papers will be discussed. You know, for CCFA, it's very difficult to understand the GSFA system, because when we develop the general standards on food additives, and we also create the problems between the cooperation between the GSFA and the commodity standards. So at the same time, we have alignment working group are doing their work. So when some food additive provisions will be discussed in GSFA working group, and also alignment issue will also be raised regarding some specific provisions. And those two topics are linked with each other. So we hope after 2 days discussion, and the USA as the chair of the working group of GSFA, and Australia as the chair of the working group of alignment, now they are working together and trying to find all the relevant issues, and they will find a solution together and give a recommendation to the plenary. So with the basis of the discussion of the physical working group, and the report will be prepared by the physical working group chairs, and submit to the plenary. So for the whole plan of the plenary, you can see from the Codex website. And as the first day, we may focus on agenda item 1, 2, agenda item 3A, 3B. And on the second day, so we will focus on agenda item 5 on the GSFA. So if on the first day we finish agenda item 3, and we still have some time, and we can continue our discussion on agenda item 8 and 7, 8 and 9. But I don't think we can touch agenda item 10. So on the second day, and we will have a full day on discussion of GSFA. And at the first day lunchtime, there will be an in-session working group on INS, I think. And the second day lunchtime, we will have an in-session working group on priority list. So we will leave those two topics on the third day. So on Wednesday, the day 3, we will to discuss agenda item agenda item 4 and agenda item 6, 7, and probably 10 and 11. So during the adoption of the agenda, based on the comments we have received, and also based on the requirement by the Commission, the standards of East might be discussed under the agenda of other business, which is proposed by China. And we can also see some other different opinion whether this committee should take this responsibility, because it's totally out of the term of reference of CCFA. But we will see how the committee will take care of it.
So this is for yeast, Dr. Fan, just to confirm, this is for yeast, right? To have a standard
Yeast.
for yeast. Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Because this is the job assigned by the Commission.
Yeah.
So the CCFA have to take this job.
Yeah.
And for agenda item 2, I think there might be some discussion on the matters for action from the Nutrition Committee, because the Nutrition Committee proposed some changes to their infant formula or follow-up formula standards, and as a follow-up action, so the CCFA have to decide on how to deal with the food additive provisions. For the CCNFSDU, both on the 42nd session and on 43rd session, which just finished on 2 weeks ago, I think. And for agenda item 3, so JECFA did a lot of evaluation, which is a risk assessment, gave the basis for this committee to develop our general standards on food additives. So, we for now we can foresee that the general agreement with the risk assessment output, and based on that, the CCFA can take a follow-up action to update the GSFA. But there are several outstanding issues might be discussed. And the first one is on the provisions on the benzoic acid, its source and derivatives. Since the JECFA evaluation has a clear recommendation, so then the CCFA may take action, for example, to delete relevant note from the benzoic acid provisions. And we can also see some comments from observers. They propose a different proposal, but we will see the discussion from member countries, what's their point of view. And also another issue is based on JECFA evaluation on the riboflavins. So based on the riboflavins, there is a new specification on IS 1014, and this substance can be introduced into riboflavins. This is a group additive. And then some follow-up action can be taken by this committee, and most probably the GSFA working group will take care of it, or if the committee can agree, and some relevant provisions will be adopted by the committee directly if there is no objection. So also a new specification be produced by JECFA on their evaluation by FAO sites. So you can see the documents from 3B. 3A, 3B.
Dr. Fang,
yeah,
we have a perhaps basically a little overview of the agenda items that I could go through briefly, and maybe invite you to comment on those as we go along. Would that be possible or useful?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll let you finish your overview first, and you give me the go ahead to do that. And then, as I mentioned, we have basically for agenda items 8, 9, and 10, we relied on input from the Canadian delegation in the form of a small discussion. It's basically videotaped. And then after that, we will offer a discussion with colleagues.
Okay, but I will be very quick on the remaining agenda items. So on the discussion of 4B on alignment, since there is a new proposal made by the chair of the electronic working group on the amendment to the procedure manual. So I think it's a big step, but the committee should take a consideration whether it's realistic for current time to make amendment proposal to the procedure manual. And our purpose is to try to avoid any further problem or inconsistency between GSFA and commodity standards. But we understand that the procedure manual is very complicated, and also the format of commodity standards and something like that. So we will see how the committee think about it. And for the priority list, nothing new. And for the 5E, the general information on the availability of data related to nitrate and nitrates, since there are just a few member countries provided the data, we will see whether JECFA think is enough for them to do the evaluation. If not the case, we will probably decide to stop the work. And for the discussion paper on mapping food categories of GSFA to the FedEx to database, and we can see the different opinions, whether the FedEx, the Food X2 should be used by JECFA, and whether some other countries' food categories cannot be used, and what is the purpose to the map, this and that. And this work has been done by Japan and also Canada and Australia or USA. So based on the discussion, and different options can be made. And someone probably want to just stop here, and we think it's very useful for the mapping, but the mapping can be, in the future, can be used as a reference just for the sponsors for use internally by JECFA. And someone may propose is very useful, and but the mapping is only with to the European food category, but also take consideration of other member countries' approach. So we will see. And for agenda item 9, discussion paper on the for the use of trisodium citrate. So for this agenda item, I can see the position from Egypt is against the proposal made by Brazil. So I would like to see seek your opinion, or what's your suggestion for next step? What should we do? Because from my personal point of view, in this paper, the proposal made by Brazil is already a little bit compromised. So for the countries who are against this proposal, and is there any constructive suggestion? And for discussion paper on the use of additive in wine, and you can see there is a new proposal in Codex website on addendum. So I don't know whether the discussion will be very quick and we can smoothly get the conclusion. So this is my hope. And if we still have some time, and then we can discuss whether the East standards can be undertaken by this committee or not. Over. So this is what I want to share.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Fan. So perhaps given that you opened the floor to Egypt to comment, I don't know if Egypt, would you like to comment now or after we go through the various items? If Dr. Fan is staying with us. Dr. Fan, are you staying with us for the rest of the meeting, or do you have other obligations?
I can stay for another half hour.
Okay. I think that would be more than enough for us to complete the item. Egypt, would you like to respond to Dr. Fan as to your position in relation with agenda item 9, and that's the discussion paper on the food additive provision for the use of trisodium citrate in fluid milk? Hanan? Or maybe if you wish, Hanan, we can discuss do the overview. ممكن أن نناقش ذلك بعد أن نقوم بربما العرض العام حول مختلف بنود جدول الأعمال. أستاذة حنان، كما يعني تحبذين.
أستاذ حنان معنا؟ نرجع لها أستاذ دكتور صمويل، نرجع لها بعدين نخلي.
Okay. So maybe waiting later on for Egypt maybe to because I think there might be some issues there. I think actually Hanan raised her hand, so maybe I'll let her respond.
We can postpone my comment after Mr. Chair of the CCFA represents the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so then with your permission then, Dr. Fan and distinguished colleagues, I'm going to go very briefly through the agenda. Basically, I think Dr. Fan helped a lot actually in reviewing the main agenda items. I'm just going to go through them very briefly and then actually offer an opportunity for you to ask questions to Dr. Fan, or actually to clarify your positions based on the questions that he asked as well. So I'm using this document that I shared with you through the WhatsApp group, which is essentially the general template document that we generate as part of the analysis of agenda items. Now, I would like to preface this with the fact that CCFA, as you know, is a very heavy technical committee. It's basically a very big producer of standards. And this is our first time in the Arab Codex initiative where we are doing the analysis of the agenda items, and we're probably not giving this committee its due consideration. I think we will have to think in the future of a different approach to tackle this one, given how important it is for the Arab region, because it was mentioned that it was one of the priority committees of the Arab region. So what we are doing this time is just an initial way of handling the analysis of the agenda items. So as was mentioned by Dr. Fan, a lot of the work will be happening during the physical working groups that are taking place before the meeting. But then there are a number of agenda items that will be discussed, of course, in plenary. Agenda item 2, which contains a number of matters referred. And in this particular analysis, we've identified a matter referred in particular from the CCFA53 in relation to the inclusion of mono and diglycerides of fatty acids that were found to be technologically justified for use as anti-foaming agents in oils. So, and this excludes virgin and cold-pressed oils. And again, in this particular case, the alignment process was actually conducted, and there doesn't seem to be any impediment for this to be considered by CCFA. Now, of course, what I omitted to say is, of course, CCFA will be considering a number of information items from CAC 44, CAC 45, and the various executive committees. There are also other matters referred for action pertaining to CCFA 52, and there is a number of them. I actually chose here just an example, for example, to address the inconsistencies related to the mention of potassium silicate. If we go to agenda item 3A, which is essentially the matters of interest arising from JECFA and the various meetings of JECFA, particularly the 92nd and the 95th meeting of JECFA, I believe that this will be an opportunity for WHO in particular, from the JECFA Secretariat, to provide an update on non-sugar sweeteners, because there was a report that was published in April 2022 that conducted a systematic review that brought together most of the current scientific evidence on the health effects of non-sugar sweetener use. And again, in this particular case, individual non-sugar sweeteners, of course, are studied by JECFA, and JECFA comes up generally with the acceptable daily intakes that corroborate the safety of these products. What WHO also has reached is that there are a number of randomized controlled trials that suggested, of course, that non-sugar sweeteners would have little impact on glucose metabolism, and in fact result in lower body weight when coupled with energy restriction in the short term. Where there are some questions, and this is not a safety question, it's more in relation with the potential impact of these products on maintaining weight loss. Here, the consensus is not there on whether non-sugar sweeteners are effective for such long-term effect to maintain weight loss. Now, as mentioned also by Dr. Fan, JECFA will be informing CCFA of some updates on ADIs, and I think one that is noteworthy mentioned by Dr. Fan is the update on benzoates. Here, there is an increase, in fact, of the ADI that was proposed by JECFA, and as a result, because you have higher ADIs, you will have possibility of reduction of limitation in relation with dietary exposures. And this will lead to a consideration by CCFA to lift some of the restrictions. I believe that some of the restrictions were included in a note in the standard, basically limiting some potential use because of the possibility of overexposure. Now that possibility is lifted because the ADI is higher. So this will have an impact on the discussion by CCFA. Agenda item 3B, related to the proposed draft specifications for identity and purity of food additives. again, coming from the JECFA assessments. Here, what JECFA will do is will be updating the committee on proposed draft specifications for the identity and purity of a number of food additives. I'm not going to go through them. I listed them here in the document for your information, both the ones coming from JECFA 92 and from JECFA 95. Based on our analysis, we see that most of the comments are supportive of the proposed specifications, and basically it would be recommended to support their adoption. Agenda item 4A, related to the endorsement and or the revision of maximum levels of food additives and processing aids in Codex standards. Here, CCFA will be invited to consider for endorsement a number of food additive provisions that are forwarded by a number of commodity committees. And again, here I listed them here, a number of committees, including the Spice Committee, including also some regional committee like CC Africa, but also CC Asia. And based also on our analysis, there doesn't seem to be any objection that would be supported by Codex procedural matters that would impede the endorsement of these provisions. And again, really, this work supports the advancement of food additive alignment between Codex standards in the commodity standards and the GSFA, and the consistency in Codex procedures, as was mentioned by Dr. Fan. So again, this is part of that effort to maintain such consistency. Now, the bulk of the work, as was mentioned by Dr. Fan, will be undertaken by two key electronic working groups, but also actually that will be meeting physically. So the working group on alignment, which is really working diligently on the alignment of the food additive provisions between the commodity standards and the GSFA standards. But also there is the working group on the GSFA, which is practically, I would say, the bread and butter of CCFA. And here, it was, I mean, it would take me too long. And like Dr. Fan mentioned, you know, there are so many technical documents that were proposed. So again, this is really an ongoing work. It's very meticulous. It examines various provisions of food additives in commodity standards, and it tries, well, it's ensuring alignment with GSFA provisions. When we looked at most of the documents that were submitted, a lot of the documents were coming, or a lot of the standards that were reviewed were related to milk and milk product standards. So CCMMP commodity standards. And again, there will be discussions, of course, of each element here. But the item that I would like to bring to your attention is, and this was mentioned by Dr. Fan, was whether or not it is judicious at this time to consider amendments to the procedural manual in relation with this alignment. And I guess, as was discussed by Dr. Fan, given that this work is already ongoing and it hasn't finished, it may be premature at this point in time to consider changes to the procedural manual, and rather actually to let the work be close to completion or get to completion, and at that point really to consider any type of amendment to the procedural manual that will take stock from the learnings that would have been achieved as a result of this alignment work. So I believe that this is an item that will be discussed by CCFA53 under the leadership of Dr. Fan. Now, in relation to the GSFA, there are a number of standards that will be considered. And again, here it would have taken me probably the entire day to go through them. So I just chose to take some highlights: colors in French fries, provisions for food additives in formulated juice and nectars. There are some provisions related to artificial sweeteners. But what I would like to mention here is that there may be a discussion to have you know, a position on titanium dioxide. As you know, so titanium dioxide is subject to international discussion right now. And there are some divergent international opinions, in particular as a result of the EFSA most recent assessment, which doesn't seem to be necessarily agreed upon by other jurisdictions. So here, I guess the discussion would be, given that JECFA is already planning to evaluate titanium dioxide in November of 2023, so at the end of this year. So even if the item is introduced in the STEP process, it would be very important to hold off the discussion until JECFA completes its assessment that is planned in November. And finally, what I would like to say is that there are two items related to Agenda Item 8, Agenda Item 9 and 10. Those are the discussion papers related to the GSFA food categories and their alignment with the FoodX2 database. So this is an important item for consideration because essentially it will influence the way risk assessment is going to be conducted by JECFA, but also the way data will be submitted to JECFA by proponents of food additives. So having an agreement on the way the food categories are listed is actually important. FoodX2, as you know, is now becoming a model database. It has been developed by EFSA, but it has been also adopted by a number of countries, a number of risk assessment agencies, sometimes actually with modifications, because FoodX2, of course, is based on the European dietary model. And sometimes it needs to be amended in order to capture other categories of food beyond the dietary habits and the dietary components of Europe. So a discussion about how do we align that is very important because it will really inform future risk assessment activities supporting CCFA's work. And there are two items here, item 9 and 10 related to the food additive provision for trisodium citrate and its possible addition to fluid milk. This proposal was made by Brazil, supported by a number of Latin American countries, but it seems to be opposed by a number of African countries. And we will see maybe the discussion later in the dialogue that I had with the Canadian delegation. There is also the item for discussion on the use of food additives in the production of wine, and particularly the reference that is proposed to the enological standards from the OIV, the International Organization for Wine and Vine. So again, this is a discussion paper that will help facilitate moving forward some standards that are currently held at step 7, I believe, and that are waiting for a discussion on how the reference to the OIV standards would be made. So before I take questions, if you allow me, we prepared a small video that we prepared earlier. In fact, it's a dialogue that I happen to have had with the representatives of the Canadian delegation. It's about 15 minutes, so hopefully you will be okay to stay for the 15 minutes. But in case you don't, I put a link in the document that was shared with you where this video is listed. So I'm going to share that with you, and then I'm going to open this to questions and comments. But before I do that, I'm going to ask, because maybe Dr. Fan will not be able to stay with us until the end of the video, and I don't want to hold you because I know it's already close to 8 p.m. in Beijing. In Hong Kong, because you're in Hong Kong, not in Beijing right now, sorry. So maybe before you leave, Dr. Fan, any comments or any questions that you would like to have to the Arab delegations?
I just would like to seek a suggestion from Egypt.
Okay. Egypt, would you like to comment right away, or you would like maybe to follow up in writing subsequently?
Okay, thank you, Sam. Firstly, Egypt has issued the national regulation depend mainly on Codex, but if we didn't any MRLS of additive in Codex, we went to EU regulation. So we give the comments on the documents of CCFA depend on the national regulation in Egypt. This is my comment. Thank you for you.
Okay, so mainly I think the reservation, Dr. Fan, is related to the fact that the provision seems to be contradictory with the Egyptian regulation. I mean, we can, yeah.
Yeah, so if we can take this agenda item like whether this committee can adopt the proposal made by Brazil and take note of a reservation of relevant countries.
Yeah.
So whether Egypt will agree on this proposal?
Egypt, if your reservation is noted, would you be okay to have a consensus to move the standard forward?
I will go to the committee, national committee again, and will give you our response back, inshallah.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. I mean, perhaps actually maybe clarification about this agenda item for colleagues. So basically, the concern is the following. Trisodium citrate is a food additive that has actually a good technological justification in relation with the production of some milk products, not necessarily the production of milk itself. It helps actually maintain the stability of even some milk, stability of calcium in particular. It can avoid the precipitation sometimes of some of these products. So the technological justification is there. But there are some concerns in relation with the potential use of this additive as part of fraudulent activities with milk and milk products. So now these concerns are not fully justified or are documented, but basically some association with some fraudulent activities were mentioned. Now, if we go procedurally, in terms of the way food additives provisions are considered in Codex, so long that there is a technological justification and there is a safety requirement that is made, there shouldn't be an impediment to basically consider that provision of a food additive. Of course, if there are, fraudulent situations, like, some food colors are actually used in conjunction with food fraud. It's not a reason to ban or not to allow food colors. You see what I mean? Like basically you deal with the fraud issues in a different manner, not necessarily by not allowing a food additive. So this is kind of the discussion that is happening, and the concern is really related to the potential use of this substance in conjunction with fraudulent activities. But again, I would say that's not the mandate of CCFA to deal with. CCFA is there to say if there is a legitimate reason for use, and the legitimate reason for use is there is a technological justification and there is a safety requirement that is met, why not allow the additive? At the end of the day, of course, each country is free to accept that use or to manage that use in accordance with their requirements and in accordance with their national situations, including to manage food fraud. If they need to manage food fraud in that relation, that's essentially their prerogative to do so. So I don't know if Dr. Fan, I helped in bringing the consensus about for that one.
Yeah, I can quote your comments maybe during the discussion in plenary.
Thank you. I hope they are useful anyway. So actually, if IOFOST is present there, like and GForce, I'm still considering to attend the meeting. That's a comment that we may make at the meeting. But again, we are an observer organization. We're not a member organization or a member country. So thank you again, Dr. Fan, and feel free to stay with us for the remainder of the meeting. But if you are not able, thank you again. I would like to use this opportunity to thank you on behalf of all the Arab delegations for making yourself available.
Thank you. I will watch the video and then I will just leave. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to actually go with this video which is a dialogue with the Canadian delegation that happened earlier this morning.
Yes. Robin Churchill. I'm the director of the Bureau of Chemical Safety and the head of delegation for Canada.
Steve Terrio, senior scientific evaluator also in the Bureau of Chemical Safety, working under Robin with Health Canada. former head of delegation to CCFA.
Hi, I'm Michelle Stockton. I'm the National Manager and Policy Programs Branch at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Well, thank you very much for making yourself available for this update. And what we wanted to do is basically to use this opportunity and I guess, if I may use the word, even take advantage of the experience that you have as one of the delegations that has consistently attended and also contributed to the work of the Codex Committee on Food Additives for the purposes of providing more insights to other delegations from the various Codex communities where the Global Food Regulatory Science Society is offering capacity building, and in particular in the Arab region and in the Southwest Pacific region as well. So my first question to you is, you're attending this 53rd session of the Codex Committee on Food Additives, and essentially CCFA is now resuming its work in person after a period of interruption due to COVID. I would like to ask you, what are your expectations in terms of items of importance, agenda items of importance that CCFA53 will be discussing, items that might have a consequence on the further implementation of the work of CCFA. So and essentially for which delegations need to be paying attention more.
I mean, I think there's only one answer to that question. Like, there's, the paramount issue, I think, will be the discussion on wines this year, because it is, I don't know, it is could be considered almost a precedent-setting issue. I guess for a little bit of background, the provisions for wines have been held in the STEP process, held at step 4, step 7 for a number of years. These have generally been safe additives. They have JECFA ADIs of not specified. Procedurally, usually what would happen is such additives would go into the GSFA at levels of GMP, so it's subject to good manufacturing practices. Historically, this has been a little bit problematic for certain members who defer to the standards set by the OIB. So I might mess up the name, I apologize, the Code of Enological Practices by the OIB. In some additives, they do set numerical levels, and some additives they set GMP, so it's not consistently GMP in that code. So as a matter of compromise, earlier attempts to get the provisions forwarded were basically assigning a GMP level in the GSFA, but then having a footnote associated with that to further specify that some members would refer to the OIB code. Now, this was proposed a number of years ago, but earlier attempts were extremely strong in the language. I mean, they were basically saying that some members require levels consistent with what is in the OIV. So the problem with this approach is that it is basically referring to an external organization that is outside the FAO, WHO FAO Food Standards Program, that is not an open and transparent body that everyone can influence the provisions, whereas in the Codex system, it's open to any Codex members. I mean, it's a Codex standard. You would want it to be managed by Codex and not an external body. So the provisions died, or they didn't die. Sorry, they were held in the STEP process indefinitely until be revived in the future, and it has been, and so we will be discussing it this year. And we it kind of picked off where it left off. So I guess it was separated between the European Union as the major proponent for the reference to the OIV. I mean, you can imagine it was, it was pushed by Italy and France particularly. versus the Quads. Basically, it was Canada, U.S., Australia, New Zealand, all against it. Now, and it was interesting because Australia is an OIV member, and even then, they felt procedurally, you know, it was just inappropriate to defer provisions to an external body.
And is this, Steve, mostly in relation to the way this external body develops standards in particular, or is it because in general it's an external body? Because Codex can refer to external bodies under certain conditions. And I'm thinking, you know, of AOAC methods, for example, for CC mass, you know, or things like that.
Yes. I think it's the way in which it was done more than a referral being made. And in fact, so our initial counter attempts to soften the notes were to, you know, along the lines of to seek guidance on what is appropriate as GMP, you can refer to what is in the OIV standards. So it wasn't necessarily that we were against referencing in an expert body. It was that the language of the note was really deferential. It was really like, you got to go see the OIV to interpret GMP. So we kind of came back to that this year. So the new note, well, the part that's contentious of the note is some Codex members further specify the use to be consistent with the Code of Enological Practice of the International Organization of Vine and Wine, in brackets OIV. So it's still a pretty strong reference to the OIV, but I think the overall position by the opposing countries has shifted recently. I don't know, like if Robin, you have if you want to explain the concerns regarding labeling and trade.
So what we've heard from some of the other countries is that there's a number of countries, particularly in Europe, who are bringing in labeling regulations later this year. And so very many countries are worried about their wines being out of compliance because they have additives that would be permitted in the GSFA if these provisions went through, but would not be right now. So I think there's certainly a lot of interest from our Canadian industry and from countries that don't have wine regulations and would follow the GSFA to really get this one through. But as a Canadian delegation, we're still deciding how strong we will be with our concern with that note.
So previously there were basically two proposals, C1, C2, in terms of the two types of notes. And now there is another note that is being proposed, like a third option, right?
It was with the two notes. One of the notes was from the European Union and Chile, and the other was from the US. But they felt that did not look like the working group having come to consensus. So they went back over the last 2 weeks and have come up with this option that they're putting forward together, which is in the addendum.
Okay.
So it's closer to the C1 note, other than they just changed the words, the maximum level, to the use.
Okay. So basically some Codex members further specify the use to be consistent with the Code of Enological Practice of the International Organization of Vine and Wine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But this is, again, this is a discussion paper at this stage, right? So this is...
Well, it's not a discussion paper for new work. Recall that the provisions have been held. So really, the discussion paper is to come to consensus on a note which would allow the adoption of the provisions. So it's really just, you know, that last leg, that last step.
Okay. So the discussion papers are there really to inform what to do with those standards that are currently held. And the concurrence on this discussion paper, or the way forward that is proposed by this discussion paper, will dictate how further, you know, how basically these standards would be moving forward.
So I think the proposal is if there can be consensus on the note, they will push for adoption of the wine provisions at step 5.8. Okay.
And I guess actually you informed me at the same time almost of a sort of you answered my second question, which really was related to, is there an item that would be contentious in the discussions of CCFA 53, but it seems that this one will be.
This one, maybe, it certainly was at CCFA 52, but we've seen an awful lot of movement by the countries that were against the note to being for the note. So not sure how contentious. In fact, it was going to be one.
This agenda item, I think, will be discussed during the latter part of the meeting, if I'm not mistaken, right? Towards the end of the meeting. Really at the end. Yes.
So I think the other one that we're expecting to be really contentious, it doesn't involve Canada, but the trisodium citrate in the milk. That one, the South American countries and the African countries do not agree on the technical justification versus the potential for adulteration. And so Canada has traditionally stayed silent on this because it's not an approved food additive for us, and we don't tend to have a lot of import or export of milk products, but we expect it'll be extremely contentious again.
So Ken, this is agenda item 9, but again, this is also a discussion paper, you know, in relation to an item that is still held, I guess. Would you be willing to give a little bit of background? I think this one is held at step 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I even wrote down step 7 in our positions. So you are correct. I mean, very, very, very briefly, it's a very long discussion paper, and like Robin said, we haven't aren't really vested in it, so we've been pretty silent. The South American countries, particularly Brazil, have been interested in using trisodium citrate as a stabilizer in certain milks, particularly those from non-bovine sources, so goat milks, and those that are ultra heat treated. In both cases, the function is to stabilize, I guess, the calcium that's in the milk, because it tends to precipitate out when high calcium milks are processed with high heat treatment. So there hasn't really been any qualms about the technological justifications, and it's a very interesting matter in the sense that we have very routinely adopted provisions where technological justification has been proven, and where it's not, you know, globally used and used only in certain regions. That hasn't been a hindrance in the past, but I suppose simply because of concerns about these milk products, and it's not even milk, it's milk products, so not intended to be used in milk food categories proper, that it could lead to deceptive representation as milk, that it's been blocked. And it's a very unusual thing to us procedurally. So I mean, if we had to pick a side, I think we would be in support of the provisions being furthered. But again, we don't trade in these products, and so we haven't really voiced our opinions.
I guess traditionally, if I follow just simply the procedure in this particular case, traditionally, if a substance fulfilled the requirement of technological justification and safety, and in this case, if I recall or I look at the information, I think there is a no ADI status for this one. So essentially, there is no health concerns associated with this, and there is even a possibility to use it at GMP as an additive. But if essentially a substance fulfilled these requirements, there shouldn't be an impediment to moving the substance to be admitted in the GSFA. I guess if there are considerations related to the use of the substance in conjunction with fraudulent practices, these need to be dealt with in another fashion and should not be, I guess, the justification to impede the use of an agent that has a good justification. And because that can apply to other practices where and so there is a precedent to that. But I believe that because of the heightened interest around food fraud and the concern about that, this is actually being looked at maybe in a different fashion. So So it would be interesting to see how that is being.
Yeah, it's been interesting because we haven't really received strong arguments of of examples of food fraud or deceptive practices or issues in trade. So the counter arguments to forwarding the provisions have been lacking, and I wonder if the mistake was earlier on when the discussions happened to allow these discussions without the suitable counter arguments or the suitable
justification
of
justification
of yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But anyway, so that will be contentious for sure.
This will allow me maybe to move to now your interest as a Canadian delegation beyond those two items. What are the items of more strategic importance for you, or even actually if you can comment on your role as a leading Codex delegation participating in CCFA, I think since its inception when it used to be CCFAC, what do you anticipate really, your objectives, your role, what would you like to see yourselves accomplish as a delegation at the end of CCFA53?
We're really hoping to move forward that, to keep things procedurally correct. We're hoping to have a good discussion on alignment, particularly with respect to that procedural manual and whether it needs to be updated now and whether there's the potential for divergence, and how quickly we should be moving on alignment given how much work it is and how much the amount of resources, because it's so important, but for CCFA53 it was 350 pages. So I think that's a lot for any country that is leading it or feeding into it, and it's just a really heavy workload.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, but I think from my own personal perspective, it's a technical subcommittee, very heavily science focused, and I think our contribution has always been to assure really clear, really strong technical accuracies in the provisions that are adopted. I think we've been one of the main contributors to the alignment working group in our comments, and we've I feel like we, even though we're not authors of the alignment working group, we are, just by virtue of the fact that we provide comments on everything.
Which is great. You're contributing really to maintaining the integrity and the accuracy of the standards. So this is very important to have delegations contributing in this fashion.
Yeah, and I feel like we've also been not afraid of raising our hand and just really asking if the provisions being considered are accurate, or if more information is needed, just because sometimes things get through just on
quickly
incomplete information, and suppositions are made, and sometimes they need to be questioned.
Yeah.
And we're okay doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the other one that we're looking forward to the discussion on is agenda item 8, and that's the mapping of the GSFA to the Food EX2. I think when we went into it, because we led that working group, we had thought we might be doing the mapping, but as we got into it, we realized that there was a number of decision points there before the mapping should be done. But I think the more we got into it, the more we realized this is a really important tool that we need to provide to JECFA as the CCFA, and to make it available to all the member countries and associations so that we're all doing exposure in the same sort of way.
And in fact, actually, that's an item that really was attracted our attention in the small expert community of the Global Food Regulatory Science Society, because again, as you pointed out, the way foods are classified, and particularly the reliance on Food X2 as one of the references being used for exposure assessment, making sure that there is really a good correspondence of the food categories in the way things are listed in the food additives provisions, and in essentially the categorization of food as they are considered in exposure assessment is really paramount. So I was very pleasantly surprised to see that item there, and I understand that this is not going to be the last discussion on this item. So this is going to be an ongoing type of consideration until that correspondence is carried out?
Well, I mean, we're certainly hoping that one of the decision points of the committee this year is that they will carry forward the work.
Okay.
We've certainly done the preliminary work on mapping, and yeah, the hope is that it'll carry forward, but that's one of the decision points, of course.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me and to us, I guess, in the Codex communities to which we will be reaching. And again, I'm going to wish you a great set of discussions as part of CCFA. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. So thank you very much again. And I'm glad that many of you stayed around for the end of this review. Just to mention, actually, this review was actually conducted with the Canadian delegation this morning. So at 8 o'clock Tunis time, because I'm in Tunisia as we speak. So it was 3 p.m. in Hong Kong. And they were kind enough essentially to offer their opinions. And the reason why I wanted it to be also shared with you is that it offers also an opportunity for the way delegations may behave in relation with agenda items where they don't have a vested interest. You see, like, for example, for the sodium, trisodium citrate, it's something that Canada doesn't have any issue with because they will not accept it. But the way they are dealing with it is actually showing you how delegations essentially handle positions in Codex, trying really to maintain the procedural integrity of Codex. I think Dr. Fan left us, so ممكن الآن أن أنتقل إلى اللغة العربية, right? So أتمنى أن يكون يعني هذا العرض كان يعني مثمر ويعني أعطاكم بعض المعلومات الإضافية، خاصة كيفية التعامل من قبل بعض الوفود فيما يخص مقترحات للمواصفات التي هم يعلمون أنهم لن يعتمدوها لأنها ستكون مخالفة لهم وليس لهم الحاجة لها، ولكن يعني كيفية التعامل معها في إعداد مواقفهم الوطنية. أستاذ أحمد، أرجع الآن الكلمة لك، وأنا انتهت مهامي بالنسبة لليوم.
لا شكرا لك، بالعكس عمل يعني ممتاز وجيد ونفتح المجال لو في أي حد فيكم يعني حاب أنه يطرح أي سؤال، أي مداخلة، أي تعقيب. الأخت خديجة، تفضلي أخت خديجة. الصوت المايك.
بالنسبة للمغرب فهو يعارض استخدام ترايسوديك سيتريت في فئة الحليب العادي السائل، ويظن أن علاج الحليب بالحرارة الفائقة يعني اليو موجود منذ فترة طويلة كوسيلة للتعقيم. لذلك وظلت طبعا هذه المنتجات مستقرة خلال هذه المدة دون الحاجة إلى استخدام مواد مضافة. فبالنسبة للمغرب لا توجد هناك comment je vais dire ça
technological justification يعني
مبرر
تكنولوجي
لا يوجد ليس هناك مبرر تكنولوجي. وحتى بالنسبة للترسيب الذي يستخدم كأساس لتبرير استخدام هذه المادة المضافة، فلم يتم الإبلاغ عن أي مشكلة تخص الترسيب في الحليب.
أعتقد أنه يتعلق أستاذة خديجة بحليب، ليس بحليب يعني الأبقار. الأبقار. أعتقد أنه يتعلق بحليب من أصناف أخرى، يعني من other species. أعتقد حسب ما فهمت.
elles sont moins stables. حتى أنا يعني.
So I think it's the issue is not with bovine milk. It's the issue is with caprine milk and other sources of milk.
Effectivement, ils sont moins stables. Pour ça, je suis d'accord. دونك بالنسبه لنا احنا هذا هو الموقف المغربي. فوالا دونك نحن نعارض استعمال هذا المضاف.
اوكي اكسلنت.
شكرا.
ايضا بالنسبه لورقه المناقشه حول وضع مواصفه جديده للدستور الغذائي بشان الخميره، فكما قيل في الدورة 44 لهيئة الدستور الغذائي قدمت الصين مقترحا لوضع مواصفة جديدة للدستور الغذائي بشأن الخميرة، وطلبت الحصول على توجيهات بشأن تحديد لجنة الدستور الغذائي التي يمكن أن تقوم بإعداد هذه المواصفة. فبالنسبة للمغرب هو لا يؤيد البدء الفوري للعمل، ولكن يمكن أن يدعم إنشاء فريق عمل إلكتروني يكون هدفه مراجعة وثيقة المشروع المقدمة من طرف الصين، ولا سيما نطاق المقترح، لأن لاحظنا أن النطاق هو جد واسع يعني، وتفكير في إمكانية إنشاء هيئة فرعية للقيام بهذا العمل. فطبعا المغرب هو يؤيد العمل على وضع مواصفة بشأن الخميرة، لكنه يلاحظ طبعا كما قلت أن نطاق الاقتراح يغطي منتجات مختلفة لتطبيقات متنوعة، وسيكون من الضروري توضيح النطاق وتقليصه قبل أي بدء عمل. من الناحية الإجرائية يؤكد المغرب أن الخميرة ليست مادة مضافة، وأن تولي المسؤولية العمل من قبل CCFA قد يؤدي إلى خطر حدوث ارتباك بشأن هذه القضية، لأن الخميرة هي ليست مادة مضافة. وأيضا قد يكون من الأنسب وجود مجموعة دولية مخصصة للتعامل مع مشروع المواصفة الخاص بالخميرة. يعني هذا هو الموقف المغرب بالنسبة لهذه ورقة النقاش.
شكرا على هذه النقطة، ربما يعني تعقيب لها. أنا أعتقد أنه الغرض من طلب أنه يتم إعداد مواصفات لهذه والبحث عن مكان في الدستور الغذائي الذي يمكن أن يكون يعني يأوي هذا العمل. الخميرة كما قلت يعني هي لا تستفي بتعريف المادة المضافة. أعتقد أنه طلب أنها تكون تحت لجنة المواد المضافة يأتي من تبرير الآتي. أولا كما قلت الخميرة ممكن أن تستعمل في مختلف المنتجات، فالعمل بها في منتج معين يعني في أحد اللجان السلعية لن يكون جدير، فيجب اختيار لجنة أفقية. من ضمن اللجان الأفقية هناك لجنة واحدة التي تعمل على مواد لها تأثير تكنولوجي على الأغذية، وهي لجنة المواد المضافة. ولو أن الخميرة كما قلت ليست مادة مضافة، لأنها يعني هو جزء تكويني ممكن أن يكون فهنا يعني النقاش سيكون it's like enzymes also, you know, if they are natural, where do we put them, you know? So it can be, it's just to try to find a home for this type of work and ensuring that you know, this is standardized to the extent possible. إنشاء هيئة فرعية أخرى يعني يقتضي طبعا موارد إضافية. هذه المشكلة بالنسبة للكودكس. يعني ربما الاقتراح ممكن أن تكون تاسك فورس، limited task force، ولكن المشكلة إنه لما حتى ولو أنشأنا limited task force هذا يعني استثمار موارد إضافية، لأنه يجب أن يكون لنا بلد مضيف، ويجب أيضا على الدول أن تكون مستعدة للمشاركة في لجنة فرعية إضافية للكودكس، يعني فيها فرعية إضافية، فهذا يعني موارد إضافية واستثمار إضافي. فهنا تأتي يعني يأتي النقاش ربما. وهنا يعني أنا أفكر بصوت عالي هنا، يعني تفكير بصوت عالي إنه ممكن أن تكون هيئة فرعية مستقلة ولكن يتم إدارة عملها في نفس الوقت مع CCFA، بحيث أننا يكون هناك فصل موضوعي، ولكن بالنسبة للموارد إذا أرادت الصين أن تستضيف ذلك فبالنسبة للموارد تكون موارد نفسها، لأنه نحتاج عادة نفس الأخصائيين في العمل. given that it's a technological impact, right? It's a safety issue and a technological impact. So you will need the same specialties. So this could be a compromise, but I'm thinking out loud, huh? So sorry.
Merci beaucoup, Sami.
Merci.
شكرا أخت خديجة. في أي تعقيب؟ أعتقد ما فيش حد شيء ثاني أخي صمويل.